We're live in 3, 2.
Welcome, Brainiacs, to a very special edition of the LeatherBrainz podcast. My name is producer Scotty, and I have here with me Mr. Alan Casanova Castro. Slapdog is missing yet again because he's out changing the world, making it a better place, and he's leaving us doofuses to sit here and talk about sports, which I'm fine with that arrangement because this is what I would rather be doing.
What an idiot. Do we think somebody kidnapped him?
I guess I don't know. I've been getting texts from him. I can't verify if it's actually him.
What is the age restriction on Amber Alerts? I feel like we should probably put one out to be safe.
All right, let me text. Who do you text for that? Joe Biden? I'll text Joe.
1-800 Amber Alerts.
Okay, so today we are obviously talking about Week 11. The Bears fans, we have just been.
Oof.
We have a lot of Bears fans that write on LeatherBrainz.com. Go check it out because they do great work. But because of that, we talk about the Bears a lot, and Bears fans have just been like, it's just turmoil over there in Chicago. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the Lions once again curb stomping their opponents to death. Like, they don't even sportsmanship doesn't exist when it comes to Detroit. They're like, we are just going to score touchdowns whenever we want to, and if you can't stop it, you can't stop it. I don't care. And then we're going to talk about Josh Allen. Alan, you said Josh Allen might be an MVP candidate this year. Before we started recording, you seem like maybe in this particular game you might have some different things to say about Josh Allen. We're going to talk about that as well. But before we get into all that, we have to give a shout out to our sponsor. They keep the lights on for us. And of course, if you've been around a while, you know it's Erica's Healthy Pet. This is the place that I go to exclusively to get dog treats, to get different sorts of topical ointments and such for their fur and for their skin. It's great. You can get cheesy bites, turkey jerky, beef liver chews, sweet potato chips, and so much more. And by the way, if you use code LB20, you'll get 20% off your order, which is a great way to support the podcast. Lets our sponsors know you're listening, and it gives you a chance to give your dogs awesome, delicious treats that they are guaranteed to love. So use code LB20 for 20% off at ericashealthypet.com. That is ericashealthypet.com. Okay, Week 11.
Yeah.
Got to start with the Eagles and the Commanders. This was kind of people were excited about this game. We got rookie quarterback killing it. We've got the Eagles finding their stride. They're looking like they might be a contender now. And the Eagles handle business, defeating the Commanders 16-18. Now, I only got to see bits and pieces of this game, but it seemed like every time I looked up, Saquon Barkley was just running all over the field, doing whatever he wants. He's been doing that for a couple weeks now. Saquon Barkley seemed like the difference maker. If you look at the stat sheet in this game, I don't know if you have any takeaways here besides the Eagles seem like they are a contender.
That and the final score was 26-18, not 16-18, which would be a wild final score.
I can't read.
Anybody listening, it was 26-18 Eagles. This game, it was close. It was pretty close for a while. I think that Eagles just have way too much offense for anybody to handle. I think that my takeaway from this is like, our team's starting to figure out Jaden Daniels. Like, are they starting to find a way to put him in a box to where he can't make those plays? And I think we might have also been playing with some fool's gold as we look at some of the early games that the Commanders had played against the Bengals, where Jaden Daniels was balling, and then fast forward to this week and you realize the Bengals just don't have a defense. So I think it's a little A, little B on what we're seeing with Jaden Daniels, but I think this is where you start to see young quarterbacks where they start to have a lot of tape on them. Things kind of not shake out their way. And I think this is a growth point for him and this team to figure out where they go and how do they use him from here. Because I think some of the teams are starting to kind of figure out his tendencies. And I think you're starting to play that over the few weeks. And me begrudgingly, as a fantasy player that had to pick up Jaden Daniels because I idiotically drafted Dak Prescott late in rounds.
Classic.
And thought Jaden Daniels was going to be my savior. And now he's kind of shit the bed a little bit from a fantasy perspective. I'm looking for him to figure this out. So this is probably more of just a cry for help on my end. That was probably my biggest takeaway of that game, is just Jaden Daniels seems to be figured out, because they had opportunities to win that game or take control of that game they just couldn't do it. They just couldn't put together any drive. They couldn't do anything in rhythm or consistency. And then you let Saquon get lathered up, and then it's just over. And that's what happened to the Commanders on Thursday.
Yeah, Saquon is so good at football. When it comes to Jaden Daniels, last year we were having basically this exact same conversation about C.J. Stroud. He was kind of the rookie quarterback lighting the league on fire. He turned his nobodies into significant weapons. Jaden Daniels has sort of done that. I mean, he's got some weapons over there that people recognize, but Jaden Daniels has been sort of the outstanding rookie quarterback. But we all will have to take a step back and remember he's a rookie. I mean, this guy has played, 10 games, 11 games this season, in his NFL career. So we don't really know how it's going to pan out. That's an extremely small sample size for a quarterback. He's still very impressive. Obviously, Commanders fans are very happy, but maybe not ready to compete with the more established Eagles. I want to also ask you about Nick Sirianni, because we talked a lot of shit about him when the Eagles were struggling, and now it seems like, oh shit, like they figured it out and they're all, they're cohesive again and they're ready to come out and win games. Is Nick Sirianni going to prevent the Eagles from being a legit Super Bowl contender in 2024?
I think as long as he's the head coach, that's always on the table for this team. I don't know what he brings to this team still, besides just being a locker room manager.
If that. Seems like the players kind of hate him too.
Yeah, I mean, in the way I look at it this way is you look at the weapons on that team, and let's say you put Kyle Shanahan on that team, or you give Andy Reid that team. Like, do they look a little different? Do they maybe have more consistency? Because yes, at the end of the week, we're going to say this team won, but the Boo Birds were out in Philadelphia. And I know that's not new for Philadelphia fans, but they were definitely booing because they were not producing a damn thing beginning of that game. Halftime score is 7-3 Commanders. So it wasn't like the Eagles were in control and just kind of put them away and that was it. They scored 20 points in the fourth quarter, largely just because Saquon just leaned on them enough to where it was over. But that's tough look for a team and an offense that should be producing a lot if you look at the roster that they put together. So I think whatever happens to the Eagles team this year, it's always going to be in spite of Nick Sirianni, because I largely think he is the one of the more unqualified head coaches in the National Football League.
Well, I'm an idiot, but he certainly strikes me as a doofus of an individual.
Well, you and I can spot him out. You and I are the biggest idiots in the room, so we can always, when you're an idiot, you can always spot him out. Know one. So I think you're spot on.
Yeah, we're qualified to discuss it. The Dolphins got back on track, granted, against the Raiders. The Raiders have been pretty disappointing, although in this game, Gardner Minshew looked okay. Raiders got a new interim OC calling some plays, and turns out, I'm sure it's very complex to be an offensive coordinator in the NFL. There's a lot you got to learn. But when you are an offensive coordinator on the Raiders, all you got to do is look around and say, okay, where are our weapons? Oh, we've got one. His name's Brock Bowers. Let's give him the ball a bunch. And it turns out that works out pretty good. So the Raiders offense looked a little bit better despite the fact that they lost this game. The Dolphins, is this just the Raiders, or are the Dolphins, I mean, it's difficult to say at this point in time that they're going to do anything this season because they dropped so many games, but their offense looked okay.
Yeah.
Maybe getting back on track.
They did look really, I think Tua looked really good. You look at, 28-36 for 3 touchdowns. He was featuring Jonnu Smith, just like we had all predicted. This is the battle of tight ends, which when you have Tyreek and you have the absence of weapons from the Raiders, you're like, yeah, Jonnu Smith and Brock Bowers are going to be your heavy hitters this game. This is a little bit of just it being the Raiders. I think the Raiders get up for divisional games at this point. I think that's going to be this Raiders team this year. Any divisional game, they're going to get up for it. If they're playing the Broncos, Chargers, Chiefs, it's going to be a slugfest. They're playing anybody else, you might have, some of your best games. And I think that was what was on this one. The Dolphins will be interesting because they haven't been overly healthy. Their defense is kind of stagnant, but they have I would say they have a decent run. They got the Patriots next week, and then they get the Packers, and then they get a run where they get the Texans, 49ers, and then the Browns. And so that they're going to have a decent end to the season, but they're going to be tested a little bit by their schedule, I think, coming down the stretch to see if they're actually for real. But AFC is kind of wide open. I think even with their record, they still have a shot to be in the playoffs.
Do you think if the Raiders somehow end up, maybe they lose a few more games, or maybe they make a trade to move up a couple spots in this draft and they nab Shedeur Sanders as their quarterback of the future? What do you think that looks like? I'm a Nebraska fan. I hate Colorado more than anything on planet Earth, almost, besides maybe the Raiders. And I'm just interested in your thoughts. Should Shedeur fix all these problems?
I mean, you're going to have to talk to Dion. Dion was on a radio show and very publicly said he'll step in and pull a Manning family like they did for Eli, having him go to the Giants if he needs to. So I think wherever Shedeur goes is going to have to be pretty buttoned up. And I know a lot of people are curious as to what Dion's actually going to do next year. Like, does he go coach the Cowboys? And then the Cowboys obviously, I think they purposefully ripped Dak's hamstring in half so they could bench him. And so I think that's probably more a probable outcome, is that somehow Shedeur finds his way onto the Cowboys, because that's probably what Dion would want for Shedeur. That being said, unless it's just going to be Brock Bowers Day, they still need other weapons. I don't think one Shedeur Sanders gets them any closer to being ultimate success than they are right now.
Yeah, and my instinct is to say, wow, Dion, you're such a piece of shit. Why are you wanting to meddle and everything? But we've seen what happens when quarterbacks who have some potential end up on shit teams.
Yeah.
Like, it can just ruin their career. So I think maybe if I'm Deion Sanders, I'm leveraging my star power as well. Like, try and find something.
Star power, and it's your kid, I mean, I coached, young kids basketball, and I see how into the parents are on that. And this is not even close to D1 college / NFL meddling. You know what I mean? I could only imagine. So no, I don't. It'll be interesting to see how that storyline plays out, because I know the NFL draft is largely going to be what Dion wants, and so those takes will be wildly interesting, because we've already seen it from the Manning family, and it worked. Eli winning a couple Super Bowls with the Giants. You can't say that wasn't a wild success where, Phillip Rivers and Chargers win absolutely nothing. So there is some truth to it, and it'll be, I know Dion will step in and make the right call for his kid, as I would expect any father to. So we'll see where Shedeur goes. I highly doubt he's going to let him go to the Raiders, though. There's no way.
What about the Giants? You think the Giants got it?
See, I don't know. I don't know. It's really tough for Dion. I think it kind of depends. I think Malik Neighbors, I think there are weapons there that are slightly attractive where you're like, we might be able to make this work. But the same thing, Giants got to address that O-line. Like, you could put anybody back there. That's not happening unless you address the O-line. You can see that play out for a few teams in the NFL this year where they just have no line, namely the tackles for the Chiefs. You look at the tackles for the Bengals. You look at a lot of teams up and down this league where they have good quarterbacks, but if the lines are shaky, you're just not going to get there. And the Giants have problems all the way down.
Well, let's talk about a quarterback who wasn't too shaky. If I told you going into this week that Jameis Winston was going to throw for almost 400 yards, a couple TDs, you'd probably think, oh shit, like the Browns figured something out. But no, those two TDs are the only two TDs that they scored, and the Saints win this game 35-14. And you can't look at this game, you can't go back and watch it without thinking, what the fuck is Taysom Hill? Like, this guy just picks a handful of games every year and just he looks like the LeBron James of football for like 4 quarters. And in this game, he rushed for 138 yards and 3 touchdowns, just unstoppable, and was a huge part of the reason why the Saints, completely demolished the Browns, despite the fact that Jameis had some offensive success.
Yeah, you look at Taysom Hill top down. He reminds me of, those like youth football teams where you just have like one really, really good player, and you're just like, you just run around, we'll make it happen. This is kind of what Taysom Hill is for me, because Taysom Hill not only he also completed a pass, he also threw a pick. He, like you said, he ran for 138 yards. He had 50 receiving yards on 8 receptions. He was literally doing everything. And he's been hurt for a while as well. He's been kind of in and out of health. And so maybe they just needed, Taysom Hill, shout out MVP still. I thought we were done with Taysom Hill. I think everybody kind of forgot about him. I saw some sites flash that like 8% of the leagues, 8% of the teams across fantasy football leagues actually started Taysom Hill. And so you think about the low percentage of people that actually remembered to put him in or actually still rostered him was kind of wild. So shout out to you if you're listening and you started Taysom Hill. Congrats. still wild to me how good he is at just football. He's just football player. You just say Taysom Hill, a football player, and then you just go from there and you just let him do his thing.
I love it. In the fantasy football world, the amount of hatred that exists for Taysom Hill is remarkable. People despise him because he has games like this where you've got Alvin Kamara or you've got Chris Olave, and then bam, Taysom Hill has almost 200 yards from scrimmage and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And you're like, great, like that doesn't help anybody. But man, it is so much fun to watch him just be like, oh, I decided that I am better than everyone in the NFL today.
The ultimate flex option. You don't know. Yeah. He holds like 5 different roles. You could put him at tight end. You could put him at running back. Apparently, you can still put him at quarterback, I think. So it's like you just kind of, wherever you want to put Taysom Hill, you can put Taysom Hill. The thing that stood out to me for this game, Scotty, is does Marquez Valdez-Scantling finally have a good quarterback? When you're meddling with
it's about time
with Aaron Rodgers and Mahomes, and then you finally get paired up with Derek Carr, which I'm sure he's been searching for his whole career. Again, he showed out again. He only had 2 receptions, but 87 yards, a touchdown. He's becoming a go-to deep threat for Derek Carr that likes to just wing it. I mean, shout out MVS finally getting with a good quarterback and finally showing that he's actually worthy of being in this league, and so I'm happy he found that for himself.
Yeah. I don't know. I think despite the success that MVS had, we have to remember why. And it's because being a wide receiver paired with Derek Carr is sort of like standing in line waiting to get into a wood chipper. Because it's just a matter of time before he throws you into the worst collision you've ever been in your entire life, which is the reason why MVS might get some extra targets, because Derek Carr's been doing that to the receivers on the Saints.
True.
So I don't know. You better enjoy it while you can, because you might be dead in a couple weeks. We'll just hopefully that doesn't happen.
Yeah, if you're a wide receiver for Derek Carr at this point, you're just kind of like, I hear what play you're calling, but I'm pretty much just going to run a go route and pray that nobody takes my head off, because I am not going across the middle, because you will kill me.
Yeah, 100%. Anthony Richardson. I think this was his best game of his professional career. He looked competent. He looked decent. The Colts win in a tight one against the Jets, and it's hard for me just to not make fun of the Jets.
Yeah, this is more about the Jets, right? Or is this are we saying this is the Colts or this is the Jets? Like what do we get more out of this game, that we know the Colts are good or the Jets are bad?
Well, the Colts, I think, are, because of the play of Anthony Richardson, largely is just a coin flip, because he is such an athletic freak of nature that he can do amazing things that no other player can do in the league. But he also doesn't seem to be able, I don't know, I'm sure he can read the English language, but reading a defense, he's got some hard times with most of the time. So it just kind of depends on the matchup. It depends on how things fall. You can't look at this game without saying, okay, what the fuck is going on with the Jets? I mean, this team they can't figure it out. They can't win a game. And that's despite the fact, again, I talked about this last week. You look at their roster. On offense, they've got weapons everywhere. On defense, we talked about it in the preseason. They have one of the best defensive units in the league. And guess what? They're going to give up 28 points to Anthony Richardson, who's played 11 total games of football in his entire life. And they're going to blow it at the end of games. Is this Aaron Rodgers? I don't know what the answer is. It might just be a culture problem, because they fired Robert Saleh under someone's impression that he was causing all of these issues. And then the issues continue and they continue, and now they don't have a head coach. So how can you establish any culture whatsoever when you don't have any leadership? It's just a mess.
You brought in Devontae and trying to give your offense a shot in the arm, and you're still 3-8. The only teams they're better than right now, according to the playoff picture, I wouldn't even say they're better than the Patriots, because I think that would be an interesting game. But the Browns, the Titans, the Raiders, and the Jaguars. That's it. That's it. Those are the teams that they're up against. They is currently sitting with a 1% chance of actually making the playoffs at this point. And juxtaposed to the other side, the Colts with that win now are right on the bubble. They're one game out of being in that playoff picture, and that's kind of what all teams are eyeing now. Where do we go? AFC's wild. The AFC is pretty much a handful of teams at the top, and then everybody else that's just kind of meddling in the middle. And I don't know. If you're the Jets, if you're a Jets fan, this is not at all not at all what you were hoping for. This is
It's not what anyone was expecting. I mean, even
No.
people who are skeptical of the Jets didn't think they would be this bad. Like, this is crazy. And, the addition of Devontae Adams, that's sort of like a Madden move. Like when you're a Madden franchise guy and you're like, hey, I just need to pick up this star wide receiver. It's going to change everything. But their problem was never with wide receivers. They have talent on the field. Their problem, first and foremost, if you're looking at personnel, is with the offensive line because you've got a billion-year-old quarterback that can't move. So you need to protect him. But it seems like the problem is culture, like more than anything else. You ask Jets fans, and they're borderline suicidal right now because they went into this year thinking they'd be competing for a Super Bowl, and instead they're just trying not to have the first overall pick in the draft. Like, what a wild turn of events. And again, I'm going to ask you straight up. Is this Aaron Rodgers' problem?
A little bit. You look at his stats; they're not great. They're not terrible, but I think their problem for the Jets, if you want to circle something and you're like, hey, we need to get much better here, and it's the same for most teams that lose quite often, and it's their third down efficiency. I think the Jets this year just can't figure out a way to keep drives moving, and even in this game against the Colts, they're 4 for 13. Like, yeah, that's not sustaining any drives. Yeah, you put up 27 points, but like, converting third downs is more about keeping their offense off the field as much as it is about you scoring points. 27 points should be more than enough to win this game against the Colts. And for whatever reason, this Jets team is just disjointed all the way around, that the offense doesn't complement the defense and vice versa. And they just seem like two totally different teams out there when they go out there. Like, nothing seems gelled. A good juxtaposition of this is like the Bills. The Bills offense complements defense turning it over. Josh Allen knows how to score. They look good. I think that's part of what you want. And for the Jets, that's just not what you're getting. In a league where it is so freaking hard to win, if you can't just stay on the field with your offense with those weapons, you got to look at, like, what plays are we calling? What are we practicing? What are you repping? Like, what are your 5 to 10 plays that you're like, if I dial these up against these coverages, we're gonna get some yardage? And they can't do it. Nothing. They have no identity. They're just a kind of a team with a jersey with kind of all out there going for themselves at the moment, is the way it looks, from my perspective.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in detail, but it reminds me of the conversation we had before we went live. Is when you look at the Chiefs and you look at how the offense struggles, but when things get tight, they put it together. It's like they have another gear that they can just shift into when the going gets tough. And the Jets, it's almost like in order to have that, you have to have an identity. Like, you're not able to bring everybody together and say, listen, let's get our shit together right now and let's go make a play. Let's make something happen. It seems like that's not an option for the Jets, and that just feels like a locker room problem.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's a belief in what you're doing is actually going to work. And it seems like every week they go out there, they don't believe in anything they're doing. They're just out there.
Yeah, and neither do Jets fans, unfortunately. All right. I don't have a lot to say about this game. The Titans are ass. They lose to the Vikings. We all know the Titans are ass. The Vikings are decent. But I do want to ask you about the Vikings. This is a team that, started the season real hot. Sam Darnold looked incredible. Sam Darnold had some woes a little bit as the season went on. This game, he looked pretty good. Are the Vikings a legit contender? The NFC is tough because, first of all, it's impossible to imagine right now anyone beating the Lions. The Lions look unstoppable. But there are so many teams just kind of right below that threshold that any one of them could win on any given Sunday. How much money are you putting on the Vikings? I mean, is this a team that you have any faith in to make a significant playoff push?
Yeah, I mean, they're 8-2. I mean, they're going to be in there. They'll get a favorable matchup. They should get a home game. This game it's a 2-8 Titans team that rushed for 33 yards. That's kind of easy. You're not going to. There's nothing. I don't think you get anything from this game. I think you just try to come out of a game like this healthy. I think the only thing that is going to hold any Vikings fan back, even looking at their record, is going to honestly just be the play of Sam Darnold. Like, can he do it when they need to have it? It's easy to do it when you're up. It's easy to do it when it's on schedule. You know what I mean? You're able to control the ball a little bit and nobody's pressing you. But when the fire's hot and you have to make a play, the reason why I would say no is just because of Sam Darnold. Like, he's serviceable, but can he do it in a pressure packed situation where you have to have it? And I think the answer to that question is no. And I think deep down the Vikings fans, and I don't think the staff would say this out loud, but I think that's largely how they feel too. Like they can't put the game on his shoulders and expect to go get a win.
You think the Vikings are going to start Sam Darnold in 2025? It's on a 1-year deal. They have J.J. McCarthy. Is Sam Darnold playing well enough to say, J.J., you can sit out a little bit longer? Let's go ahead and run with Sam.
Yeah. Depending on how J.J. heals, obviously you're going to see how this season shakes out. I think as it sits right now, I could see Sam Darnold starting next season for this team on another deal. But I don't think the long-term plan is to have him in that role. It's, NFL is what have you done for me lately? And obviously we see what he's done so far. So I would say yes, but it depends on how the rest of the season shakes out. He could just go on a skid of skids and just totally bottom out and not have it. And that's the taste that's going to be left in everybody's mouth. And then I would lean more no, like they'll probably just want to get rid of him, to see what else they have in JJ. He will be on the team. He will probably start week 1, but I don't think the plan is to keep him in that spot, depending on how JJ recovers and in the reps he gets.
Now that you answered that question, I actually think Hunter and I also had this conversation, and I said pretty much the same thing. But Hunter brought up an interesting point that if this Vikings team does make a decent playoff push, Sam Darnold plays well for the remainder of the season, how much money is Sam Darnold worth to sign knowing you have J.J. McCarthy there? Is Sam Darnold going to be a sought-after free agent by other teams that are quarterback needy, and then bam, Sam Darnold is now out of your price range and you got no choice but to throw J.J. in right away?
Yeah. I don't think – it depends on how it looks. If they win, but he didn't really – he's kind of the group participant that didn't do much, but the group got an A on the project, then he probably is not going to command a lot of money in the market. There's a lot of tape out on Sam Darnold. I don't think we're going to get anything ultra new from him, where we're going to be like, oh my God, oh, just kidding. He's actually just an amazing MVP candidate and we had no idea. I think he's serviceable. He obviously has a really good team around him that's allowing him to be serviceable. He's got, I would say, the best wide receiver in the league from a talent perspective in Justin Jefferson. And I think that affords you a lot of opportunities to take risks in it. If you put Justin Jefferson on one side of the field, that opens up, the rest of it for you to make those throws. And I think they've coached him up well enough. I don't think that he is going to be the reason why they would succeed in the playoffs. I think it's they just need him not to piss it away. And
not to fuck it up.
Yeah, I think that when you move on from that, that's not going to command much money in the market. I think his price is his price. I don't think he's going to do anything where like, oh, just kidding. The one thing you don't want to do is what the Giants just did, where Daniel Jones had one good year and you're like, well, maybe that's just who he is now. And then you pay him all this money. You're like, oh, just kidding. We should have seen this coming from a guy that was like a 0-star recruit who didn't do anything in college and then starts his whole time. You gotta, the tape's out on you at some point. You have to trust it. And I think for Sam Darnold, that's what the front office is going to lean on to. He's serviceable. If they go far, they're going to keep him, but they're not. If he commands money elsewhere, they're going to let some other team take that leap.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think Sam Darnold's played well, but at the end of the day, it's sort of like Brock Purdy has worked his way out of this conversation now to where we have enough tape on him being above average to extraordinary that we can comfortably say Brock Purdy is just a great quarterback. Sam Darnold, we have so much tape showing him, granted, on pretty shitty teams with not a lot of options, but you see a lot of him being subpar. And then one season with the best wide receiver in football, a great team around him, a great coaching staff. Like this is, I said from the beginning of the offseason that whichever rookie quarterback went to the Vikings was going to be the best rookie quarterback in the class, not because of talent, but because of the situation. Of course, JJ ended up getting injured, but we saw that play out a little bit with with Sam Darnold. Just the situation was so stellar that it's like, you have to be really bad in order to fuck this up. All you got to do is throw it to Justin Jefferson, and that guy makes every catch imaginable, and even unimaginable, some might say. So I agree with you. Ultimately, he's going to be good. Let's talk about what became the game of the week, which is this Packers-Bears game, because I've got a message here. I asked MK. He's over at Fantasy Brains. We air them live on Thursdays, so check them out, especially if you're into fantasy football. They give you all the information you need to know. They do a great job. MK, I asked him for a quote, what his thoughts were on this Bears loss. And he said, the Bears are always going to choke. The future is bright player-wise. Caleb is 110% our guy. It seems like he's maybe convincing himself of that more than the rest of us. But we will never be good until we have a coach. Bring me Mike Vrabel. That's what he says. And ultimately, that message, I think, is true. They fire Shane Waldron. They get a new guy in. Offense looks better. Caleb's getting the ball out faster. Offense looks a little bit more solid. They had a good chance to win this game. The Packers didn't play very well. They just played just well enough in a win on a blocked field goal, similar to what the Chiefs did with the Broncos last week. Obviously, this is devastating for Bears fans. They were so close. They were so close to finally beating the Packers. Matt LeFleur has never lost to the Bears in his career as a head coach with the Packers, which is insane.
That's wild.
That's
not even
so
one fluky game. That's wild. That's really, really hard to do. And my heart goes out to MK. I was texting some other Packers fans during that, and I was like, you know what? I don't trust this Cairo Santos kicking operation to begin with. Like, you know, unless this is literally like right in front of the goalpost, like 10 yards away, I would be nervous as a Bears fan. And I know if there's a lot of controversy on that last field goal because that center did seem to get contact, which would be a flag because you're not allowed to make contact with the center like that on those kind of plays for player safety. And they seem to let it go. I mean, being that as it was, I think this is the second time that I've seen Caleb Williams lead a game-winning drive and ultimately not be able to win the game because of factors outside of his control. The other one being the Hail Mary that Jaden Daniels threw, where that, you know, he led the Bears down, they had it, and then of course they lost it at the end. And this is another situation. That final drive looked really good. I know it's hard to put all the stock into one drive, but when he had to have it, you could see the lights come on, and he was making throws. He was finding Keenan Allen. He was, you know, hitting these routes where he had pressure in his face, and he was standing in there and delivering on time. And it's like, yeah, that's what you were expecting to see out of this team. Like, deliver that, you know. And it's funny how you don't see that the whole game, but then when it has to happen, you start seeing some players. So I'm with MK on that. I think I even in a loss, I still felt like Caleb Williams proved that he belonged out there. Like, he didn't look lost. He made some big time throws, and he did lead them to an opportunity to win the game. And, you know, that's why it's 3 phases of the game. You got offense, defense, special teams, and their special teams couldn't get it done. And the Packers were able to sneak out a win. I think if you're a Packers fan, much like the Chiefs fans last week, we were like, whew, thank God we didn't drop that one, you know, because like that would have been a brutal one to drop to a rival
of all the games,
you know, where where people thought you should have won handily anyways. And it was a nail biter.
Yeah, I 2 things. So number one, I don't know if you saw this. I saw some articles get shared around after this game that included quotes from the special teams coordinator. I don't remember his name, for the Packers. And he said something before the game to the effect of, I would be extremely surprised if we don't block a kick in this game. And the reason he said that is because the entire special teams unit, when they were in their meetings, recognized that Santos has an extremely low trajectory on his field goal kicks. I'm guessing, you know, usually that's because the kicker doesn't have a huge leg, and so he's got to drive the ball a little bit more. And they all recognized it, and they called their shot from the beginning, and then it happened, which is amazing. And then, yeah, I agree with you 100% on Caleb Williams. I mean, he played well, and the thing that I always go back to is that this Bears offensive line is just trash. Like, it's absolute garbage.
So bad.
And they can't establish a running game. They lean on Caleb Williams. He is running for his life. So it does feel like, okay, you get a competent coach in there. You bolster this offensive line. They could have.
They could have had one. That is the most damning thing of this whole operation, is they could have had one that would have 100% went to Chicago. Instead, he's in Los Angeles with the Chargers, you know, putting them 2 games out of a division lead right now. They could have had it. That's got to be the most frustrating part of this whole thing. If you are a Bears fan, you got to look at that front office and say, what were we thinking? You and I are just talking about with quarterbacks. You know what you got. The resume's there. You know what you're getting out of these guys. Like Sam Darnold, sure, you know what you're getting. This is a prime example of where the front office got in its own way, thinking like, oh, you know, let's just figure. No, like Eberflus, that name doesn't even sound like a coach that should be coaching in a Super Bowl. Like, never would you say like, oh, Eberflus in a big one. Like, no, like that. Unfortunately, he sounds like some director at some, you know, PR company not like a head coach of a football team in Chicago. They needed Harbaugh. It was an obvious choice they could make, and it was obvious that they would be able to sign him. He was going to get a great quarterback. You know how Harbaugh is with developing young quarterbacks. You see, what he's doing right now with the Chargers, and that's got to be the most frustrating thing. They had it. They freaking had it. And now if you're a Bears fan, you have to hope they don't blow it twice, because they have to get a coach in here that knows what they're doing. They cannot rely on these coordinators or up and comers to get it done. They need somebody that knows what they're doing to come in.
Yeah, Slapdog and I talked about this last week, that I think there needs to be a lot more blame going around to Ryan Poles, because in the preseason, we're all like, holy shit, look at what this guy did. He got Caleb Williams. He made this crazy trade with the Panthers that gave them all these weapons. Like, this team looks incredible, but they missed out on perhaps the biggest piece, which is a competent leader. And not only that, you're getting a new quarterback. You have a coach who's questionable. If things don't go well, there's a decent chance you're going to let him go. And now you have your rookie quarterback going into a sophomore season with a new coach and a new system. Like, you're just setting yourself up for failure. And granted, like I said, I'm a doofus. I'm an idiot. I'm looking at this in hindsight, but it seems like it should be relatively obvious that I'm at least hoping they had like a hardcore conversation about this in the Bears facility prior to the season starting. Like, they had to have been screaming at each other, arguing about whether or not they should get rid of Eberflus, and somebody won out and said, let's give him one more chance. But I also want to talk about this Mike Vrabel thing, because obviously that's a name that's thrown around for a lot of teams. Mike Vrabel is widely regarded as a great head coach that's a free agent right now, and someone's just waiting to nab him up. I generally think, though, when you have a rookie quarterback and you hire a defensive-minded head coach, you might run into this exact same problem.
Yep.
Because best case scenario, you get a great offensive coordinator who lights the league on fire, and then bam, he's a head coach for another team the following year, and you have to learn a new system again.
Yeah.
So for me, if you're like, we got this star quarterback, this is who we want to be the face of our team, go get an offensive-minded head coach, someone that if they succeed, they're going to stick around for 10 years, and put yourself, in a position to where you can have some continuity throughout your franchise.
100%. I think I like Vrabel. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a good motivator. He's kind of like a Dan Campbell sort of coach, where he really motivates a group to do some like collective good. I don't think Vrabel, if you look at what he did outside of maybe like a Tannehill, but I don't think he actually developed a quarterback. You want a head coach that has proven track record of or a high coordinator. I know I just said you don't want to trust it with a coordinator, but could be a coordinator where they have a proven track record of developing young quarterbacks. That's what you need right now. You need somebody to work with Caleb Williams. We heard it on the broadcast a few weeks ago where Tom Brady was basically damning the whole system, saying like, these quarterbacks aren't getting developed. They're basically 7-on-7, gods that come in and you try to, put them with a system, and they're just not developed to manage a team. Because a lot of it is, you manage a team, you work with the checks, you know how to get teams in and out, you know how to get your offense in and out of plays and convert, and know what buttons to push. And I don't know if Caleb Williams is getting any of that. He largely looks like the same player we saw in college, just trying to make it happen in the pros without any guidance or development from a head coach or a coaching staff for that matter. So I think if you're the Bears, if you're the front office, you got to really, really, really hone in on guys that are offensive oriented, that have developed quarterbacks. That's the only way you're going to make this work. Going and getting a Vrabel, I don't think puts you any closer. I think it'll probably shore up your team. I think your team will be a little better, but I don't think, if your goal is to develop Caleb Williams, your first round draft pick, the star quarterback, if you're trying to develop him into a star, you have to go get somebody that has a proven track record.
So I had a crazy idea that just popped into my head while you were talking. The New York Giants may very likely fire every single human being that has ever stepped foot in that building, including Brian Daboll. Would it be crazy for them to take a head coach who was just fired for failing miserably and saying, we want to make that guy our head coach? Would that be just a typical Bears move? Maybe there's some merit to it.
Would you say that's... See, this is hard because we're not in the back end, so we don't know who made what calls. But do you, from an outsider's perspective, do you think it's Daboll's fault that the Giants are the way they are?
No, of course not. I think Brian Daboll, much like Daniel Jones, I think Daniel Jones is not equipped to be a star quarterback, but I think you can largely say that the front office has let that team down over the past several years. It's not just this year. but this team has not had weapons for forever. And that's just the way it is. So it's hard to succeed as a quarterback if your quarterback's not succeeding because he has no weapons. The head coach is going to have a hard time succeeding. When I look at Brian Daboll, I see a coach who has developed quarterbacks, including Josh Allen, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I see a coach who is a victim of circumstance and should be given another chance. The question is, I don't know how unusual it is. I would guess pretty unusual to hire a coach who was just fired and then say, we want you to come be a head coach. Because Brian Daboll as a coordinator, I think will have success pretty much no matter where he goes, assuming it's not a total dumpster fire of an organization.
Yeah.
But as a head coach, seems like that might be crazy.
That's assuming that Daboll wants to continue to be a head coach afterwards.
Yeah.
You know, he might be over this whole thing. He's like, I kind of actually like just working with the offense. I think if you're a Chicago fan, the one reason you don't want Daboll is because he took Ozempic and got skinny, and that's not what you want out of a Chicago coach. Like you want pizza, you want thick, you want beer. And I don't know if Daboll's going to give you that. So that would be my only hesitation is like, is he now too skinny to be my head coach? Like we need somebody thick. That's why Eberflus isn't working. Like the Bears should honestly just go after Andy Reid. Like that's exactly what you want. That's what you're looking for.
At least that archetype. Or they need to have like a mandatory, you have to weigh 275 pounds in order to be in this building.
Yeah, like don't even talk to any of them. Just be like, what's your ideal dinner look like? And then just kind of assess from there. So if they're like, oh, just like
portion size,
like a tofu salad, like, you know, no, that's not what we're looking for.
Yeah,
not at all.
Go coach in California.
That's why Kingsbury, Cliff probably won't be there because he looks like somebody to me that's very health conscious, eating a lot of celery, and that's not what you want. You know, you want somebody that's fat.
Yeah,
that's
agreed.
That's the only advice I can give on this whole head coaching search is just find somebody that's fat.
Yeah. So if they reach out to us for advice, we're just going to call Brian Daboll and say, listen, you got to reverse all that work you did because it's insane. Like, what are you doing with your life? And maybe grow a mustache. Be a Mike Ditka. Yeah,
belly up to a buffet and make it happen.
Yeah. All right, I've got a fun question for you. In the wake of the Jags getting absolutely fucking stomped by the best team in football right now, the Detroit Lions, 52-6. Which loss do you think would be worse hypothetically? The Jags against the Lions, which we've seen, or the Jags against the Oregon Ducks? It's a twist on this idea of the best or the worst team in the NFL versus the best team in college, because I think generally speaking, we all recognize it's a pretty stupid conversation because the NFL team is full of NFL players. They're going to win no matter what. But could the Jaguars put up 52 points against the Oregon Ducks? I don't know.
Without question, they would. Without freaking question, any NFL team would absolutely.
You really didn't.
You
didn't lean into this bit. Like
no, I'm not leaning into that at all. There's no way. But hypothetically, if they were to lose a game, obviously losing to a college team would suck way, way worse. The only team that I think maybe would have had a shot was the 2001 Miami Hurricanes. Might have had like the only shot of being like, hey, we also are full of NFL players as well as you are, but the two deep is where it gets you every time. It's the two deep.
Yeah.
Sure, your frontline starters are good to go, but like the two deep where they rotate in linemen, you're like, oh, those are actually more NFL guys. So we actually can't do that. We have this walk-on from, Sioux Falls, South Dakota that's going to come in here and now try to tackle you. Let's go ahead and make this happen.
We have this 18-year-old kid who has never played in front of more than 1,100 people.
Right.
Yeah, no, I agree. Bigger question about this game is the future of Doug Peterson. I'm surprised we haven't seen him fired already. Yeah. And granted, there's a slight delay here from when you and I are talking and when the Brainiacs get to listen to this conversation. So there's a chance that by the time the Brainiacs are hearing us say this, he has been fired. But he hasn't been fired as of right now in this moment. And that is very surprising to me because it seems like the writing's been on the wall for weeks.
Yeah, and that's quite a ballsy statement that he made where he's like, I'm not getting rid of any coordinators. It's on me. And it's like, you sure? Because if you're trying to save your own job, one of the first things you do is you just fire some coordinators and say it was their fault, and it buys you a few weeks to figure it out. But yeah, I think he's trying to get fired at this point. I mean, that's the only logical explanation. Is like, can somebody what do I have to do to get fired at this point? I think he's going to try everything, and we'll see what he tries next week if he still has a job. Because I'm also surprised, like you are, that they didn't just fire him before the clocks even hit zero. They're just like, you're relieved of your duties. Please go into the stands. They give him a
interim head
ticket.
coach at halftime.
They give him a ticket in the stands and be like, "You're in section 318, row 2. Go find your seat, please."
Yeah, here's a free hot dog. I don't know if you saw the whole Mike Tyson Jake Paul thing happened recently.
Yeah, like an
and
idiot.
I don't care about that one bit at all. I don't even care.
You
about
didn't watch that?
So I watched bits and pieces of it. I didn't sit down.
I was
and
a
watch
sucker.
it.
I was religiously watching, hoping something would happen, and like an idiot, 3 rounds in, realized I've been duped.
Oh yeah, this guy's 60. He doesn't
he's
he
actually
doesn't punch anymore.
He's done moving now after 3 rounds, and I'm just gonna watch him walk around the ring for the next 20 minutes. Perfect for me.
But like I said, I wasn't real excited about that whole spectacle, but I did enjoy seeing this interview that this 12-year-old kid did with Mike Tyson. That's been going around because it's fucking hilarious. It's like a 12-year-old kid talking to Mike Tyson, and he's like, "Hey, people my age finally get to see Mike Tyson in the ring, all this stuff. What do you think this is going to say for your legacy for our generation?" And Mike Tyson went into this tirade about how legacy is ridiculous because we're all going to be dead and dust and it doesn't even matter and who gives a shit. And he's talking to this 12-year-old. But all this is to say, I think Doug Peterson wants to be fired. He doesn't give a shit about his legacy. You think he would rather be sitting on a beach, drinking out of a coconut, or watching Trevor Lawrence get his ass kicked for 4 quarters and then have everyone in the media call Doug Peterson a moron? He doesn't give a shit about his legacy. No. He wants out of there. So I agree. I think he's just counting down the minutes until he's fucking free from this Jaguars team.
I wouldn't be surprised if they've canceled all meetings and he's just hanging out. Guys, I'm just really trying to get fired here. We actually don't have a game plan. So, because there was no effort on that. The whole team's given up. 52-6.
Yeah. We also have to talk about the Lions. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to the episode last week with me and Hunter, but I admitted to him that I'm back in on the Lions. I'm all in because I think Dan Campbell's been doing a much better job in terms of decision making. Granted, he doesn't have to make many tough decisions when they're winning games by 50 points. But either way, I think this team is the best team in the NFL. I have very, very few things to say about them that are in any way critical. They're just incredible. But Dan Campbell, how does he get his guys motivated to put up this many points? Every time they touch the ball, it's a long touchdown. They never take plays off. They look like they're in a game for their lives every moment of every game, no matter what the score is. And it's amazing.
I don't know. It's really good. It's way different when you want something versus when you're trying to defend something. And I think you see teams on opposite ends of that. I think the Ravens, they're obviously trying to defend their place up top. The Chiefs trying to defend their place up top. And then you look at the Bills, you look at the Lions, you look at these teams that are fuck it. We're trying to get there. And some would say it's much easier, obviously, to do the hunting than it is to be the hunted. And I think for the Lions, they're just in pure hunter mode. They haven't gotten the success. They were one half of football away from being in the Super Bowl. And now they're just fuck it. We're just going to go do it. Who cares? What do you have to lose at this point? If you're a franchise that's never won a Super Bowl, if you're one of these franchises that have literally never won a Super Bowl, who cares? Go for it all the time. Who gives a shit? What are you protecting? Go get it. And so I think that's part of his mindset that he probably has with his team of we're just going to fight for each other and we're just going to go do it. And when you're playing like that, you come back against the Texans and you beat the shit out of the Jaguars, and you're down key pieces of your team on defense, and you're still finding ways to get it done. And it looks like they lost their linebacker Anzalone to a broken arm as well. So he's going to have to, the next man up, they're going to have to pick themselves up off the mat.
I do think it's just kind of funny to imagine in your mind. You picture most NFL coaches, you go into halftime with a huge lead and you're okay, how do we adjust our game plan? Take time off the clock. We don't want to score with every possession. We just want to make sure that we're taking up as much time as possible, long sustained drives. And then you picture Dan Campbell in the locker room and he's okay, we're up by 40. Now we have a chance to try to throw a triple reverse to our left tackle and see how fast he can run. It's him and Ben Johnson are just sitting there giggling to each other, trying to come up with different ways that they can that they can run up the score. And I do think it's very funny.
Yeah, good for them. They're a great team. Definitely the best team in the NFL.
All right, let's talk about the Rams because they're 5-5. They struggled heavily with injuries to start the season, but things are getting back on track. At 5-5, especially in what is turning out to be the most messy division in football right now. Anyone is, this entire division still up for grabs. I still think the Rams are contenders. I think with Matt Stafford, I think with Puka Nacua doing what he's doing, which is insane, and then Cooper Kupp being Cooper Kupp and, granted a little bit older, a little bit maybe more frail, but he can still make a ton of plays. This is a team I don't think you can count out against anybody, and I wouldn't be surprised if they go on a massive win streak here, and we're talking about them as a real playoff team, in a handful of weeks.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Rams have the best roster to do it. And I think they're just unfortunate kind of beginning of the year not being very healthy, but they certainly have all the pieces in play, and you look at the division they're in, it's gettable. The NFC, there's some opportunity, but like they have to put it together. I think what it comes down to is even these teams that are in the hunt, there's just zero room for error at this point. You just have no room for error. And that's kind of what you have right now. And so for the Rams, it's kind of a last hurrah because you don't know how long this group's going to stay together. So I think that's just going to be a rallying cry for them. I could see them pulling it together, but they just have to do it now.
Yeah. All right, just real quick, I got to get your take on the Steelers because it seems like you might have a crystal ball. I think all NFL fans around the league are sort of in the same boat, which is after the last 2 weeks, we're like, oh shit, the Steelers might actually be pretty freaking good at football. And that's evidenced by the last 2 weeks of picks for Kickoff Karaoke, where Hunter and I both picked against the Steelers for the last 2 weeks, and you picked that the Steelers were going to win the last 2 weeks, and we're like, I don't know, the Steelers are feisty, but like, can they really do it? Russell Wilson, who knows? Well, they did it. And Russell Wilson, we were talking before we went live, he's got some plays where you're like, that's vintage Russell Wilson, that's awesome. And then other plays where he just lofts the ball into triple coverage in the end zone when they're going to make the game a 2-score game. Like, he does some stupid shit, but it seems like with this defense, he's good enough to make the plays necessary to win games. And with a coach like Mike Tomlin, they are actual contenders. It's not just like they're a 500 team. They're actual contenders.
Yeah, this is also not the first time that I've seen a Mike Tomlin coach team win a game without scoring a touchdown. And so the fact that he can do it again against the Ravens and put it like this is vintage Tomlin. And for me, I think I said it jokingly a few weeks back, but when the daylight savings hit and it gets darker earlier, it's Tomlin time, baby. Like when you get later in the season, Tomlin just knows what to do. He knows how to get his team ready. He knows how to game plan, and it's good luck to any of the teams. And I know the Chiefs very famously have a game coming up on Christmas in Pittsburgh, and I'm like, oof, that's not looking easy any easier than it. Beginning of the season, you're like, this is cake. We'll be able to take it. But once again, Tomlin's never had a team below 500 in his career. And that's insane when you look at the lack of QB play he's had over the last handful of seasons, where you're like, this is a quarterback-driven league unless you're Mike Tomlin. Like that's
those two things go hand in hand, though. Like if you're a team that's constantly winning 9 and 10 games, it's pretty difficult to get a quarterback. Like you're never going to get one in the draft. You're going to have to make some significant moves to get it. So it's similar to Mike Vrabel. Like Mike Vrabel was also that guy who was on coaching a team that was always competitive, just never going to win a Super Bowl. And it's because they were like 500. They're always 500, and that just makes it impossible for you to grow your franchise. So it's funny, like to me as an outsider, I don't know how Steelers fans. I assume Steelers fans love and revere Mike Tomlin as they should because he's amazing. But it's also like, well, this guy's kept us relevant for 20 years, but also prevented us from doing anything for 20 years because we can't rebuild because we're never in a position where we need to rebuild, but we're also not competing at the highest level. It's very weird, but it seems like maybe things have changed in 2024.
They're just in this meddling spot where they'll make it to the playoffs and then like maybe win a game, but like probably not. And so like, what would you rather have? Would you rather have times where your team spikes and like goes off and you can win a Super Bowl, but then you'll have like a decade where you don't make the playoffs, or would you rather just like be really good and make the playoffs every year?
I'd rather have the opportunity to get a Patrick Mahomes, a Josh Allen, a Joe Burrow. Like I would rather have the opportunity to get a guy where I can be like, yes, it was all worth it. Now I'm in love and I'm reinvested into this team. When you are constantly dealing with, Mitch Trubisky and Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, it's like, I don't know. It's Pittsburgh is a football town. They love their team no matter what. They're going to be diehard. But I just feel like the level of excitement that the fans are going to have for the organization could drastically swing upward with a real star quarterback. And it just seems like they're never going to have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're saying they should fire Tomlin because he's too good and they can't get a good quarterback. That's basically what we're saying on this podcast. If you're Pittsburgh, you should get rid of him so that way your team can suck for a second. So maybe he should retire for a year, wink, wink, let somebody else coach, get a high draft pick, get a good quarterback, and then bring Tomlin back and then see what he can do. Maybe that's what they should try.
I think we're thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
They need to listen.
We're solving the world's problems right here on this podcast.
Well, there's one problem you can't solve, and it's the fact that I hyped up the Falcons all year long, and I talked shit on the Broncos all year long. They finally faced off against each other, and the Broncos fucking just throttled the Falcons. I didn't get to watch this game. It was happening during the Chiefs game, and so I was focused on my team. But I look at the score, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, what the fuck happened? Why are you insisting on making me look like a moron?
Yeah, that felt kind of personal. The Broncos were obviously pissed off from the week before, which I don't blame them. You did everything you could. You should have won that game, and you didn't. So I went the other way with my pick last week because I thought that this Denver team was going to come out flat. When you have a young team, they don't have that sustained success for a long time. The ups and downs of a season can kind of get you, and I was a little leery of how they were going to respond when you get like your heart ripped out like that. And I mean, I was surprised. I mean, Bo Nix, man, he went off. I did not see that happening. I know he's good. I didn't think he was, that good. And I don't know what's happening with this Falcons team. This Falcon team is just backsliding at like the worst possible time. And they don't seem to have, their fingers on the pulse of anything good right now. I think it's just, they're largely like what we said about the Jets. They're just kind of out there right now. I don't see any kind of identity. And, they're 6-5 and, they going into this game, I felt pretty confident that they were going to win. I thought they had the better team, and they just got absolutely beaten down by the Broncos, just up and down the field, like not even close. Like there's nothing redeeming about this game from the Falcons' point of view, where you're like, yeah, let's watch tape and let's do that again next week. There's like, you pretty much just burn the tape and say, well, we're not doing any of those things that we did this game. Let's find something new. But hey, I said at the beginning of the season, I said I'm a fan of the Broncos. I liked what they were doing with Bo Nix.
Wow. Don't just throw out the word fan like that. That's crazy.
Okay, you know what I mean. Obviously, I don't like the Broncos being a Chiefs fan, but from a neutral standpoint, just kind of looking at what teams could do, I liked what they were doing and kind of the direction they were going. Please don't clip that and say that I'm a Broncos fan, because that would suck.
Right. It's not like you're talking to the producer. I don't know. I have no control over what comes out.
Oh, that's gonna suck.
Yeah, but the Broncos are certainly moving. Here's what I said last week. I said the Broncos, after they almost beat the Chiefs, are moving up from ass to frisky territory. They're like kind of right in between there, where you can't really count them out. They're good enough to compete in most of the games. After this game, should I keep bumping them? Are they full on frisky now? Are they a team that like you can never count out unless they're playing, the best of the best in the NFL?
I think they could go toe to toe with the best right now. I think they're getting confident. Defense is, the Broncos defense is portable. They have a very favorable schedule down the stretch. You look at what they can do. I think they should be in the playoffs. I think what's crazy is you look at this AFC West and they could get 3 teams into the playoffs because of how the AFC is this year. Like the Bengals not being able to figure anything out defensively or special teams. They drafted a kicker and now he can't kick indoors, which is wild to me. And then you have what's happening to most of the AFC, where it's just like they're just the Browns. Everybody's in flux. You just look at everybody in flux and you're like, okay, well, maybe we can actually sneak in and do this. And for the Broncos, I fully expect that they should be in the playoffs. I think their schedule sets up that way. I think a lot of these teams are going to weed themselves out. The AFC East is a disaster outside the Bills, and the AFC West is going to have 3 teams in the playoff picture. And we'll see what happens down the stretch with the division itself. But if I'm a Broncos fan, I'm feeling good because the AFC South looks like shit. The AFC North, has 2 teams, and then that's it, and that's kind of it outside the Bills. And you're like, okay, so we just kind of beat the Colts. We take care of the Raiders, and that should put them in, prime position to kind of hold off for some of these playoff spots. So that'll be wild if Bo Nix gets the Broncos in the playoffs. But at this point, they got to be heavy favorites to be in the playoff picture when
if the season ended today, they'd be there. But that's the thing. I I want to continue talking about the AFC, and we'll segue this conversation by allowing us to vent a little bit about our Chiefs, who lost to the Buffalo Bills in the regular season yet again. I mean, it's just something that seems to happen all the time.
It's a tradition.
I came away from this game, and I might be a slave to the moment here, because when I saw Josh Allen, granted, the Chiefs for some reason decided in the most important moments of the game to not spy Josh Allen, which is insane to me. But when you see Josh Allen running for 40 yards basically to secure the game, breaking tackles left and right like Superman, I came away saying, it's Josh Allen. And if the Chiefs are going to drop one game, which obviously they did, I'm glad it was this one. Like, this is the best loss that there could have been on the Chiefs' schedule so far through the season. Both of these teams are good, high-caliber teams. Josh Allen's playing really well, but it still sucks, and I'm still pretty sad.
Yeah.
I'm wearing sunglasses. You can't see my tears.
Yeah, I think the Bills are good, and the Chiefs were obviously gettable, especially from a regular season. And the Bills had to have this game. This was a must-win for the Bills if they wanted any chance of staying in the race for the 1 seed. Because if they would have lost this game, they would have been 4 games back. And this game now they win, and now they're only a game back of getting the number 1 seed. So it's a little bit of the script for each of the teams. I think you look at the Chiefs, it's tough, man. It's tough to sustain success like that, and when you're undefeated and you're just trying your damnedest to get this thing off the ground. I will say Josh Allen is as much as I think he should be an MVP favorite, and I think people are finally starting to come around to it. Without that last run, I didn't think he was doing anything wildly spectacular. I think everybody's going to look at that last run and be like, "Oh yeah, that's what he was doing all game. He's just running all over him." It's like, no, he happened to do it at the very end, which is perfect. But a lot of this game, and I know there were both quarterbacks are without a lot of weapons. And so that's kind of what you saw. You didn't even see both teams at full strength, and it was still a good game. So you can only imagine when they kind of get some of these pieces back, what this game could look like in the playoffs. But, I think Josh Allen is kind of a victim of what is happening around his team, but I don't think he was doing anything MVP worthy in that game. It was more of just like his defense created a turnover early on Mahomes, which Mahomes seems to be doing this year, where he's just kind of like, hey, I'm just going to give the ball. I think we talk about turnover luck. I think Mahomes is falling victim to bad turnover luck this year overall. And then the last interception he threw, wasn't his fault. It was 4th down. You got to do something. So yeah, I think it was a good game. I think if you dive into the numbers, you'll see that there's like maybe 4 plays that actually really dictated this game. It was the Mahomes interception was one. The missed Mahomes throw to Xavier Worthy was another. You look at the deep shot that Allen had early that led to a touchdown to Cooper that kept that drive alive, which could have been out depending on how you looked at that right foot. And then you had that run at the end. Like, that was the 4 plays that if those happen differently or the calls go the other way, we're talking about something totally different. So from a Chiefs fan perspective, I think there's a lot to work on. I don't think this team is nearly as good as they've been in the last few years. I think their defense is good, but there's only so much they can do. And sure, they gave up 30 points, which I know you want to touch on, but also time of possession was complete opposite of what the Chiefs have been doing this year. The Bills had the ball for like 10 more minutes than the Chiefs did this game. And that's not what you want to see either. So if Andy Reid said it afterwards, they need to run the ball more. I think that's largely what this game, but it was a great game. I think it's always great when you can see 2 amazing quarterbacks duel it out, and love the product that's on the field.
100%. And I do want to, I'm not like all these idiots around the NFL who, whenever the Chiefs win a game, the first thing they do is make up conspiracy theories about the refs. You'll notice we got 2 Chiefs fans after a loss. Neither one of us, we're not talking about the refs. It's crazy that can happen. But I do want to say that I want to give Josh Allen and this offense some flowers, because this is the first time that the Chiefs defense has given up more than 28 points in a regular season game since 2022, when we played Tom Brady and the Bucks. So this is a defense that has been incredible over the last couple seasons. And obviously, if you've been paying any attention, you know that. And this Bills team, missing some key weapons, came out and made it happen. And ultimately, that's if you're a Bills fan, that's what you want. You want your team to come out and do what you have to do to win the game, despite the circumstances. And they did that. So you got to give all the props to them, and just hope that we get a chance to end their season again in the playoffs, which would be hilarious again.
Yeah. Tea leaves. That's what you don't want. That's if you're a Bills fan, you still want to stay hungry. And I know they're still in for the 1 seed, but a large part of the fan base in that team is like, oh, we got to get this one. And they put a lot into that game, and I guess you kind of want to know what if you're a Chiefs fan, the other side of this is like, did we hold anything back, or was that our best? And I think that's what makes you a little nervous if you're a Chiefs fan, because I think the Bills, even a few years back in Arrowhead, the Bills just came in and just actually, absolutely put one on them, I think, on a Sunday night game. And, we know what happened that year. The Chiefs turn around and end up winning a Super Bowl. So you don't know. It's week 10. There's a lot of season to be played. There's a lot of development and growth. So if you're both sides, you got to keep your head about you and be like, all right, that was one game. Perfect. We still are fighting for a lot of things, but you can't go too far one way or the other, because anything can happen over the last, 8 weeks of the season.
Yeah. And as Chiefs fans, we just got to remember that how many pieces are we missing on this team? Just the difference Isaiah Pacheco would have made in this game. Andy Reid comes out and the first thing he says is we need to run the ball more. Yeah. It would help if you had your RB1, wouldn't it? And Kareem Hunt's been doing great, but imagine that 1-2 punch. Like, those sorts of things will get better as the season goes on, get a little bit healthier. So that's how I'm coping with this loss anyway. Yeah. And by the way, it's only one loss. We're 9-1. That's pretty damn good. I'll take that.
Good win for the Bills.
All right, one last game to discuss before we get to kickoff karaoke and then get the hell out of here. And once again, I am going to eat my words, because the Chargers, a team that I believe, if I were to quote myself, described as fucking ass, came out and beat the Bengals. I do think that the story of this game is the story of every Bengals loss this season, which is, unless Joe Burrow is playing superhero football and putting up 500 yards and 17 touchdowns, and Jamar Chase has 300 yards receiving, this defense is just going to give up points to everybody that they play. And this offense has to be perfect, and they have to win in shootouts. And we saw it in the second half of this game, where they really turned it on. They made it a game, scored 21 unanswered points to make it a game. But because the offense did not show up in the first half, it just wasn't enough, because this Bengals defense might just be one of the worst defenses in the NFL.
Yeah, which is total opposite of what Joe Burrow was experiencing at the beginning of his career, when he basically had one of the best defenses in the NFL that would get turnovers and key stops, and he could lead. That was large part of the reason why, while this young offense was getting set up. Now, this is why front offices are important to the game, because the Bengals have to start making business decisions. You see it with T. Higgins, you see it with who they're re-signing, and it is a team freaking game. I think the one thing that's frustrating to me about today's sports and NFL and NBA or whatever, it's like you go on Twitter or X or Reddit or wherever, and you have people that are like so enamored with the individual that it's almost like they'd rather see the individual put up great stats rather than their team actually win. Versus, from my perspective, I'd rather have a winning team than worry about if everybody thinks my quarterback is the greatest thing in the world. And now you have this point where I feel like the NFL front office for the Bengals is largely invested in that way, where they're like, all right, let's make sure Joe Burrow has all his weapons, and we'll make sure he can throw to him and throw for a bunch of yards. Well, game script is largely dictating that he has to throw for a lot of yards. Game script is dictating that he has to throw a lot of touchdowns, and he's been doing it, but that's not how you win football games. Yes, he has the stats, and they're like, oh, he should be MVP. Well, you can't have both things. You can't have a defense that's getting stops. Maybe you run the ball more. Maybe you're controlling the clock. Maybe you're eating it up so that way their offense doesn't have the ball. And so now you're looking at it so singularly from a quarterback perspective that you're like, oh, look at all these stats Joe Burrow's putting up. And you're like, yes, but that's not how complementary football works. You need to have all three phases. You look at any of the teams that win, if you're too invested on one side, it's just not going to work. And I think, yes, Joe Burrow is putting up great stats, but he kind of has to. They have no choice. What else are they going to do? Hand the ball off 30 times? No, your defense sucks, so you have to throw. But your defense sucks because your front office refuses to invest in the right pieces to have a well-rounded football team. So this is going to be interesting to see what happens to the Bengals, because now they're getting so far off from complimentary football that they're probably not even going to be in the playoffs, which is looking slimmer and slimmer while they still have that door open. But it's like, now what do you do? Where do you invest the money now? Because, Jamar Chase, you got T. Higgins, you've already paid Burrow, your line is kind of suspect. Orlando Brown's hurt. It's like, where do you go? You have Hendrickson, you have Hubbard on the edges. Great. You drafted a kicker now that has missed a ton of field goals. So there's just a lot of question marks. And I don't think the way people look at this team is accurate, because it's not like everything's perfect on offense, because that's not, because that first half can show you it's not. But they're having to play a certain way because of the way their team's structured, which is leading to points, which is leading to good QB stats. So a lot to think about that, but it's all complementary. It all has to be complementary.
Yeah, I agree. And I heard, I don't remember which pod, it might have been Pardon My Take or one of the big ones. They were talking today about T. Higgins, and specifically said, like, they just need to re-sign T. Higgins. Like, they need to figure it out. Like, T. Higgins is such a huge part of this offense. He's so complimentary to Jamar Chase and blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting here thinking, you realize how fucking atrocious this defense is. Like, you need to figure out just how to stop the ball and then figure out the offense later. If Joe Burrow is the star quarterback that everyone believes him to be, he can figure it out. Tom Brady figured it out with few weapons. Patrick Mahomes has been figuring it out with fewer weapons. Like, that's
Josh Allen
formula.
Is currently figuring it out with fewer weapons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're a top tier, higher, upper echelon quarterback, you have to be able to figure it out. But the defense is so unbelievably pivotal. And I don't want to take anything away from Joe Burrow, because he has been playing really well, because, like you said, he has to. And he's been stepping up to that challenge. He's been largely keeping them competitive and, doing what he has to do to keep them in games. But it's just an impossible task when your defense is this bad. So I think T. Higgins needs to go, not because I don't like T. Higgins. I think he's great, but you have to start making those tough decisions and get some defensive pieces in the game.
This reminds me of the Chiefs team that went to the AFC title game in Mahomes' first year starting, where they had no defense. Mahomes had to throw all those touchdowns. Mahomes had to make crazy plays. Mahomes had to chuck it all over the field because he had to. And now you look at the way he's playing now, and he's largely subpar from what his standards should be this year, which fully acknowledge that he's a part of the problem why this team isn't as successful as it is. But he's also playing within the game script of his team. He doesn't have to chuck it downfield all the time. He doesn't have to make those plays that he normally did. And I think you're just seeing the inverse of that, but it normally happens the other way, where you start making those plays and you make adjustments and your team gets better. Whereas, like, the Bengals, I feel like, had the recipe for what they needed in front of them from a defensive and offensive perspective, but then they are, like, so hell-bent on keeping these star wide receivers and with their quarterback that they're, like, neglecting the rest of the team. And now they're wondering why is our defense so bad? Why is our offense really good? And it's like, it's not fucking rocket science. At some point, you've invested too much one way. So of course you're going to have a good offense, but now you can't win any games. What's the fucking goal of playing football? You're there to win the game, not put up 400 yards on a loss. Like, you're there to win a game. And so good for you. You're putting up MVP quote unquote numbers, but you kind of have to, because your team sucks overall. So congratulations, Bengals. That's where you're at.
Yeah, and the last thing is just, we also shouldn't underestimate the degree to which Jamar Chase can carry this offense in the receiving core. Because T. Higgins is great. I think he's an awesome player. I think he could be a wide receiver one on a lot of teams in the NFL. But it's not like this offense is going to completely fall apart without T. Higgins. I mean, you have Joe Burrow. As long as he's healthy, he's good. Jamar Chase is arguably the best receiver in football. This is a team, even without T. Higgins, that can find success long term as long as they build around that situation. So I just think it has to happen that way in order for them to address the real concerns on the team, which are glaring. Now, we're going to get to kickoff karaoke here. If you are new, first of all, welcome and thank you for tuning in. But kickoff karaoke is a season-long competition between the three of us. I know Slapdog's not here. Actually, I'm going to check to see if he sent me these picks. But it's a season-long competition where we bet against the spread in 4 games that we decide on. And whoever guesses the most games wrong at the end of the season has to sing the national anthem live on an episode of this podcast, which will be very embarrassing for Hunter to have to do. So I'm going to run through this quick.
Let's do it.
Primarily because I have to pee.
Let's go for it.
We're going to go through it. So the first game is Vikings at Bears. The Vikings are 3.5-point favorites in this game. This one's interesting. Who are you going with?
I might be 0 for 2 on my letdown game after a close loss. But I'm going to take the Vikings 3.5. You never know what the psyche of this team's going to be, and I think I'm leaning on what the Vikings can do offensive and defensively to kind of control this game. It'll be close. The 3.5, I'm not thrilled about the 3.5. I would like that maybe 2.5. I think lower, but I'll give me the Vikings 3.5 with the Bears.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think both of these teams have a lot of talent on the roster. I think both of these teams are, obviously we've seen the Bears be a little bit more disappointing than we would have liked, but they are both perfectly capable of winning tough games. So I'm going to give the edge to coaching, and the Vikings, very clearly have the edge in coaching. So I'm going to give it to them as well. Let's go over to the Cardinals at the Seahawks. This is going to be a fun one. Cardinals, despite being the away team, are 1-point favorites. Who are you taking over here?
You got to show out for slaps. I'm going to take the Cardinals on this one. It is a toss-up. I think the Cardinals are just playing really, really good football at the moment. The Seahawks are kind of Jekyll and Hyde with their performances, but I like the way the Cardinals are playing right now, and I feel like that's favorable for them in Seattle. I expect them to go up there and win in a tough environment.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think the Cardinals have just been so much fun. And it depends on the week. Honestly,
Right.
It depends on the drive with the Cardinals. Sometimes they just look pitiful, but when they have it put together, they are a very, very fun team. And I've said it from the beginning. I think the Seahawks, they can be competitive. I just don't see them taking that next step to be real contenders in the near future here. And with this way the roster is structured, I just see the Seahawks disappointing more often than not. I think the Cardinals are more exciting, and if they come out on fire, I think the Cardinals can run away with this game. So I'm going to go with you as well. Moving over to the 49ers at the Packers. The 49ers have been a little bit disappointing, but we all know what they are capable of as an organization. They're getting healthier. And then the Packers have had some ups and downs, especially with injuries themselves. But the Packers, young team, promising quarterback, a lot of the good things to like about them. Who are you taking?
Packers, I've been on the Packers train. I think they still have the potential to be one of the best teams in the NFC, and I think when this season plays out by the end, I think they'll be there. Love's got to cut down on the interceptions. They got to control the ball, control the clock a little bit more. 49ers coming off a tough loss. Be interested to see how they bounce back, but it's like since they brought back McCaffrey, the offense just feels a little bit disjointed. I can't really put my finger on it. I know they have injuries. I know that's part of it. Everybody has injuries, but I think largely the 49ers, it's just where's the ball going? Who's it going to? Juwan Jennings showed out this last week, but I don't know if that's sustainable long-term, and we'll see what the plan is for, but I like the Packers. I think this is a good spot for them to get another win off of a thrilling win in Chicago last week.
Yeah, and I agree with you again. I'm going to go with the Packers primarily because of Lambeau. I've bet on the Packers every time they were at home throughout this kickoff karaoke series, and so far it's done me pretty well. I think the 49ers are going to take that step forward and look like the team we're used to seeing, though. I think Christian McCaffrey, after another week of being on the field and getting back in the offense and another week of them being able to scheme around him, it's only, I think he only rushed for 50-some yards last week. I don't remember how many he had in receiving, but not as involved as you'd like him to be, being the superstar that he is. And I think that's going to change as he gets more comfortable and gets back in the swing of things. So I kind of expect this to be a pretty good game, and I think there's potential for this to be a high-scoring game too. But I do think the Packers, with the home field advantage, are going to take it. And our last game here, Eagles at Rams. This is going to be, it looks like maybe the first one you and I are on opposite ends of.
Looks that way. I got to take the Eagles. I know we're talking about how Sirianni largely holds his team back. I like this matchup for the Eagles. I think it favors a lot of their strengths from how they want to run the ball and some of the things they do defensively. Again, I don't love the line at 3 being away, but I'm going to take the Eagles here as they kind of figured some things out there late in that game against the Commanders.
Yeah, I'm pretty much entirely betting on vibes, and I feel like the Eagles are constantly on this thin ice situation. And I know they've been doing well. I know that the Eagles fans are kind of bought back in, but it seems like with Sirianni at the helm, we saw it last year, that this could collapse under itself at any given moment. And I think the opposite about the Rams. I think they've had a ton of adversity this year, but I never lost faith that with the weapons they have, with the coaching staff that they have, with the quarterback that they have, that they would eventually figure it out. And I think they're kind of on that upward trajectory right now. So I think this is going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a tight game. I'm going to take the Rams just on vibes, and we'll see how it plays out.
There you go, baby.
All right. And that is all we've got. Thank you again for tuning in, all you brainiacs. We love you very much. Please remember, first of all, visit ericashealthypet.com. She keeps our lights on, and she has great products for you and your pets. But second of all, go visit LeatherBrainz.com. We've got a ton of very talented writers who are writing all sorts of content, whether it's fantasy football stuff or betting stuff or just complaining about the Bears. Got a lot of that going on. But either way, it's very entertaining, very informative, so make sure you check that out. And then also, last thing, make sure you listen to the Fantasy Brains podcast, which is live on Thursdays. Matthew Cahan and Charlie go through all of the awesome fantasy advice that will keep you winning games at this critical moment of your fantasy season, so make sure you do that. Alan, I don't think I'm missing anything, so we can get the hell out of here.
Let's go.
We
are
out.
This is our Colts. This is our team. We bleed blue. This is our Colts. Whether win or lose, we love them. For the shoe, Colts forge. Let the world hear us now. This is our team. Go Colts.